You've probably seen it everywhere. LinkedIn profiles, conference speakers, titles like AI strategist and chief AI officer are just popping up like mushrooms after a rainstorm. It feels like practically overnight, everyone's an AI expert. But when you actually stop and look at the time it takes to build deep, genuine mastery, the numbers just don't add up. The real question is, expert on top of what? Every so often, a new technology comes along and just changes everything. Right now, that's AI. And like clockwork, with every one of these big waves, you see a predictable pattern emerge. This sudden explosion of self-proclaimed experts. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and talk about why that title is so much harder to earn than it looks. If you want practical AI strategy and tips to grow your business, hit the subscribe button. But this is nothing new, right? We saw this happen with the internet, then with mobile, and definitely with crypto. But with AI, the sheer speed at which people are slapping the expert label on their profiles, it's something else entirely. It's happening so fast, it can make your head spin. So, how do we cut through all that hype? Well, here's the plan. First, we'll look at this AI expert explosion itself. Then we're going to do a quick 10,000-hour reality check. After that, we'll dig into the hidden foundations that real AI knowledge is built on, talk about the invisible risks of ignoring them, and finally, I'll give you a super clear set of signals to help you spot a real expert in the wild. All right, so let's dive right in. Over the last couple of years, you've probably seen it everywhere. LinkedIn profiles, conference speakers, titles like AI strategist and chief AI officer are just popping up like mushrooms after a rainstorm. It feels like practically overnight, everyone's a guru. And let's be totally fair here. A lot of these people are impressive. They're smart, they're great communicators, they're super confident, and they've obviously spent some time with the latest tools. But here's the uncomfortable truth we have to face. When you actually stop and look at the time it takes to build deep, genuine mastery, the numbers just don't add up, which leads us perfectly into our next section, the math. Because this, my friends, is where the hype really starts to crumble under a little bit of simple arithmetic. I'm sure most of us have heard of the 10,000-hour rule, right? The one Malcolm Gladwell made famous. Now look, it's not some unbreakable law of the universe, but it does point to a fundamental truth. Becoming a true master of any complex field takes a massive amount of focused time and effort. Let's just do the quick math. Let's take those 10,000 hours. At a normal 40-hour work week, that's 250 weeks. That's almost 5 years of full-time dedicated work. And hey, even if you're an absolute machine, pulling a grueling 60 hours every single week, no vacations, no distractions, you are still looking at merely 3 years. And that's just to get your foot in the door. Because, and this is the part people just love to forget, AI isn't a skill you learn in a vacuum. You don't just wake up one day, start from scratch, and become an AI expert. It's something that has to be built on top of other deep, complicated disciplines. Yeah, think of it like this pyramid. Real modern AI expertise is that tiny little capstone at the very top. But what's it sitting on? It's sitting on a massive solid layer of software engineering. You have to know how to build robust, scalable systems. And that layer is sitting on an even deeper foundation of math. We're talking statistics, probability, you name it. And the whole thing has to be grounded in actual business context, right? Knowing what problems are even worth solving in the first place. AI doesn't get rid of these layers. It stands on their shoulders. So, this brings us to the single most important question you can ask. When someone comes to you claiming to be an AI expert, especially after just a year or two in the game, the real question is, expert on top of what? Because if they don't have that deep foundation in engineering, in systems, in business, that claim just kind of falls apart. And that's not gatekeeping, it's just physics. And believe me, This isn't just some philosophical debate. When you're missing those foundational layers, it leads directly to our next section: invisible risks that have very real and often very, very expensive consequences. This analogy just nails it. Think about it. You wouldn't drive your car over a bridge designed by someone who just watched a few YouTube tutorials but never actually studied physics or material science, right? Of course not. The risk is obvious, it's tangible, it's terrifying. Well, the danger with AI is exactly the same. It's just invisible, right up until the whole thing collapses. So, what kind of risks are we talking about here? We're talking about things that fail silently, deep inside a business. Critical sensitive data can leak out. AI hallucinations, when the model just makes things up, can start shaping major business decisions. The costs to run these things can spiral out of control with no warning. Or maybe, worst of all, a system can fail silently at scale, corrupting your data or your processes for weeks before anyone even notices. With all of that doom and gloom, how on earth do you actually cut through the noise? Our final section is all about giving you a practical toolkit for spotting the real signals of genuine expertise. First things first, let's get the title straight. A real chief AI officer is not just a prompt engineer with a fancier title. It's a senior, cross-disciplinary leadership role. They're responsible for strategy, for governance, for risk. You can't be in charge of strategy if you've never actually been responsible for a real complex system in your life. Here's your first litmus test. A simple question. Have you built systems that actually ran in production? Because building a cool little demo is one thing. Building a scalable, reliable system that real customers depend on, that can't go down, that is a completely different universe of complexity. Litmus test number 2, and this one's a big one for me. Can they talk about failure? Someone who's only ever seen success in a tutorial, well, they don't know what they don't know. A true expert has battle scars. They understand all the weird ways a system can break because they've lived it. And they can explain those failure modes just as clearly as their success stories. And the third test, do they talk about reality? See, the world of AI hype is all about endless, amazing possibilities. But the real world is about trade-offs. It's about budgets and regulations and technical constraints. A real expert doesn't live in the land of cool demos. They live in the messy world of difficult choices. But honestly, the biggest tell of all often just comes down to their tone. True experts, the ones who have actually wrestled with the complexity and seen the hidden dangers up close, they tend to sound more cautious. They have a healthy respect for what they don't know. They avoid making absolute sweeping statements because they've learned the hard way that in complex systems, certainty is a luxury you just can't afford. Ultimately, this whole thing boils down to one simple truth. Expertise isn't something you declare. It's something you accumulate slowly over years of hard work, painful mistakes, and constant learning. Anyone claiming they've mastered AI overnight isn't really breaking new ground. They're trying to break the rules of time. And in the end, time always, always wins.